And here we go. Well, hello, world. Welcome to the show. This is Cancer of Corn. And today we've got Deep State Kuba on. Say hi.
Gates.
Wie geht's? What's good? So, do you want to introduce yourself before I do?
Certainly. I'm Kuba. I used to work in the Deep State. I was a geopolitical analyst at the Department of Defense before it became the Department of War and back when it was all woke and gay. Um, that evolved out of project work in the Middle East that I did during my dissertation when I was getting my PhD in political science. Before that, I did my undergrad at Harvard, which is a pretty good achievement for a refugee boy from Poland. We left when it was still the late communism, and I grew up in Canada, hence the accent. Having the doors of the American elite open to me, getting to know people who would go on to be assistant attorney generals under Donald Trump, I developed an early radicalism and total disdain for the people staffing the elite positions of power. But nonetheless, I had a preoccupation with how this world worked, the ins and outs, the way that the geopolitical sausage gets made, and I got to see it from the inside. Now I'm a bit of a freelance, have PowerPoint, will travel consultant guy when I'm not earning the big bucks on leftist podcasts. And you can find me regularly at This Is Revolution with Jason Miles. And I tweet at Dr. Kuba 2. I will not tell you about Dr. Kuba 1.
Okay, let's keep Dr. Frankenstein Kuba 1 under the wraps then. I got somewhat of history as well. One day I will talk about it. Not today. Today isn't the day, guys. Girls. So, you're an immigrant from Poland, yeah? You're one of the guys stealing jobs.
Precisely. I get to be a double immigrant because I was a Polish immigrant in Canada, Canadian immigrant in the United States. Now I'm back in Warsaw, and they don't really know what to make of me. I speak Polish well, but not perfectly. And so after about 10 or 15 minutes, I can see their eyes start to narrow. And it's like, what are you exactly?
A German?
Oh, heavens no. But the combination of a Polish background, and my parents are both professors, and my father, I like to think of him as an extraordinarily progressive 19th century gentleman. He's a real intellectual. He's a real intellectual. Downstairs in his library, I saw, you had previous episodes about Erich Fromm, and that's where I learned of his books. There was some Oswald Spengler in there. Marx I had to find on my own for obvious reasons, but that gave me a pretty good European grounding. And then the Canadians taught me diversity, equity, and inclusion, I guess, avant la lettre, and all of the habits that actually go into making liberal democracies liberal, which requires some learning from a Polish starting point. Default setting here is ethno-nationalism, the absolute core. I like to tell people that the bad news about Poland is it's 50% fascist. Good news about Poland is it's only 50% fascist.
Just thought the same about Germany. Okay.
Yeah. And for me, the European right? Bad example is Hungary,
Mhm.
where I don't know exactly how to handicap it, but it's more than 50% fascist. I remember when Jobbik was the loyal opposition party and the last great hope for bringing down Orban's illiberal nationalism. Um, and the reality is that what we, or rather, what in the Anglosphere, especially among politically correct they thems, is taken for granted that you're going to have an other orientation, a real preoccupation with individual rights, gender equity. Uh, people's identities will be grounded in individual preference and expression. All of this is very foreign to Eastern Europe. Um, Poland got some of it thanks to Kosciuszko, thanks to the Enlightenment, and thanks to having even worse examples of illiberalism to the East and West. But generally speaking, it's not an instinctive default position, and it fits uncomfortably, even in the places where it fits best. Whereas the Iron Cross, the Arrow Cross, um, all of the crosses really uh, have an unsettlingly familiar feel when you get into this part of the world, which is one reason why, um, you know, I love me some Brussels, European Union.
Some
That's
waffles. Yeah.
exactly. That's the Brussels sprouts are the antidote for the bitter draft of Eastern European nationalism. It's a great way of taking German money, laundering it in a way so that it's not reparations, and then using it to rebuild our economies. Um, we don't have to say please. We don't have to say thank you. We can continue to be sullen and remember all the ways that you guys wronged us. But the airports get built, the railroads get improved, and now you can drive from Vilnius to Warsaw without getting stuck behind a donkey cart, right? So on behalf of my countrymen, on behalf of the entire region, let me say what they never will, which is Dankeschön, meine Freunde.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Yeah, this is also something that the Canadians have taught me. It is incredibly cheap to be the more gracious party and the bigger man, but people remember it. You'll be harvesting those dividends for years. I remember quite vividly. There's this Canadian crime series. It's two cops. One is this absolute alpha male, straight out of reactionary American MAGA Twitter, grizzled beard, deep voice, um, comfort with violence, extreme competence. I can't remember if he's divorced or his wife is dead, but you know the thing. Um, and he's partnered because he's a lone wolf, unpredictable, plays by his own rules, maverick type. He's partnered with younger French Canadian woman who's the
Ah,
lead on the case. And
she has
there's
to keep an eye
one
on him. Yeah, yeah.
precisely. She and the police lieutenant, who's of course also a woman, um, they have meetings, about whether he's growing or progressing as a human being, right? His approximate level of sensitivity, is it dipping below an acceptable 7, right?
Mhm.
Or do we need to get HR involved? And there's one particular episode where she orders him not to talk to some witness. He breaks the rules. He talks to the witness. They run away, and it becomes a whole mess. And the very next episode is them driving in a car, and he turns to her and he tells her, "I want you to know I was wrong and you were right, and I apologize for that. I should have listened to you. I broke the rules. I thought I knew better, but that was a mistake." And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is why it's so easy for me to say sorry. This is why Canadians apologize to people after they have coffee spilled on them, right? The whole culture models this kind of willingness to acknowledge wrong and respect the other person. And no wonder somehow we've managed to keep the French from wandering away, right? Like in some ways, Canada was the EU before the EU because you managed to get Brits and French to share a country without murdering one another.
They did for, what was that, 100 Years War?
There was the Hundred Years' War. There was the 7 Years' War. Both of these are low estimates, right?
Just saying,
And
there was a lot of war and murdering.
exactly. And the one reason why I think that Canada and the United States have such different trajectories, and I know that I'm going to be dragged in the comments for being a lib cuck apologist for Canadian extractive capitalism and whatever you want to, however they decide to characterize it. But Canada is in a lot of ways an extraordinary example of a country that's managed to make a peaceful democratic evolution over a lengthy period of time, despite having uh, diversity of cultures from the very beginning. And if you think about it, it's a particularly inauspicious start because the French and the English are, it's the equivalent of cats and dogs or natural enemies, uh, Protestants and Catholics. And the French Canadians begin as a conquered people. They're not brought in through any consensus mechanism, but they lose a war at the Plains of Abraham. Montcalm is killed by Wolfe, and then the French king just surrenders them so that he can keep the sweet, sweet sugar flowing out of Haiti. Which I have to say, it must sting a little to be abandoned by your own home country so they can continue doing the worst kind of slavery. But the British could have. I mean, we know that it's not a moral condition of theirs to be gracious to conquered Catholic peoples. You can talk to any Irishman if you have any doubts about that. But for purely pragmatic reasons, based on cost benefit analysis and relative strength of population, they decide that we're going to rule Quebec with toleration and mutual recognition. And that becomes the basis of Canadian politics from that moment on. Of course, it's unequal, but it improves over time. And the French Canadians are not required to become Anglos. That's not part of the deal. And they're not required to go through rituals of humiliation and surrender. They're allowed to be sullen. They're allowed to savor their wounds over time. They're allowed to be a little resentful. But as long as the system holds, as long as there's peace and good governance, then they can speak French all they want. They can be as Catholics as they want to be. And I think that this founding dyad then gets expanded to white ethnics, first massive wave of migration, then non-white immigrants. And right now, belatedly, scandalously, imperfectly, but nonetheless, there's an attempt to establish that kind of reconciliation, that kind of relationship with the Indigenous people of Canada. And the alternative, of course, right? If you ask a leftist, the alternative would somehow be, I don't know, multiracial Switzerland. I can't even imagine what type of society, real existing society, would meet the standards of the progressive left at this stage. But the realistic alternative would be something like the United States, where the founding dyad is not French and English, but white masters and black slaves. And you have, in theory, this great liberal constitution, this orientation towards individual rights and freedoms, this representative system of government, but the entire society is predicated on there being a master class
Mhm.
and a slave class,
Mhm.
and the relation between them being one of violence, force, and extraction,
Yeah.
which creates that divergent tendency where after 150 years, 250 years, it's the monarchy that is more free, while what, as we're seeing right now, the republic is careening straight towards particularly ugly and particularly stupid kind of fascism.
Exactly. I don't know. They didn't start to arrest people for protesting the genocide in Gaza in Canada, did they? I mean, they locked up loads of people in London. Declared this one. I already forgot the name. Some Palestinian peace
Yes,
movement.
Palestinian action.
Yeah, that was the one. Declared them a terrorist group, which was now sacked by some judge. So I don't
Mm.
even know. So the law is unlawful. What the fuck?
Yeah,
This is wild.
the Britain is such a disappointment,
Yeah, right.
the,
So
especially coming
German.
from.
What the fuck, man?
No, there's especially coming from Canada, where I remember we had these very, very old history textbooks, which they were so old that they had the wrong flag of Canada on them. They predated the maple leaf, and they talked about, with great and glowing optimism, the future of our Commonwealth. Right, the sun would never set
Ah,
on the
from
new
that
British
age.
community nation.
Very old.
Yeah, exactly. They were very optimistic about the prospect of one day training the Black South Africans well enough to give them some limited form of self-government. That's what I read in the 90s. Um, so you can imagine what they talked, the glowing terms in which the mother country was discussed. And I remember the first time I went to London, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is 21B Baker Street. This is Shakespeare's theater. It's like from TV, man. But then the second time, I started seeing all of the things that were imperfect and started looking at it like a real country. And then I'm like, France is better. But yeah, um, even whatever we say about the UK or the EU, there's Minneapolis, right? There's what's going on in Iran right now. And the real crisis point in the West, um, once you're off Twitter and you're no longer hearing about haplogroups and the different IQ theories of at mega based dad 2025, then it becomes clear that America's in crisis and that the real threat to any type of democratic order, any type of respect for human rights, really the call is coming from inside the house. It's Washington that's exporting destabilization not only to the Middle East as it has always done, but increasingly you have support for far right parties unabashedly coming from figures associated with Trump and with the U.S. government. Their biggest fan of the Alternative für Deutschland is a American billionaire that controls a significant social network. I mean, I don't know how American he actually is, given that his mentality seems to be entirely formed by apartheid South Africa. But um, the there's something perverse about living at a time where you have Americans telling Germans that they need to be more fascist.
Yeah. You know, you got a way to just render my brain empty, just pulled it all out, and I'm just sitting here sucking it all up and just nodding to myself and thinking, man, it's fucking crazy. And this whole thing in Iran, um, I mean, we had this Venezuela thing going on, and maybe they believe they can pull off something like that, just real quick, do some yada yada regime change and whatnot. But then you realize, no, they bombed the girls' school, killed about what 160 girls just on the first day of this war, and that must be Israel's language learning model being a racist dog or something. I don't know. It seems to be cynicism. When people talk about precision bombs, is this precision? Is this cynical precision? Some kind of we fight the terror inside the woman's bodies before they can be born, or what kind of bullshit is? I mean, this is just so fucking crazy, man. And
Yeah.
there
Well,
you go.
I would not underestimate the possibility of simple incompetence. Um, the let me let me sort of give you some context about what I've seen going on with the American military-industrial complex, which I used to be an insider there, and the intelligence agencies. My ability to progress was always limited by my citizenship and my background. There were times when I would be working on a project and everyone else would have clearances. The conversation would turn to adult topics and I would have to leave the room. But even so, I got a sense of how the organizations worked and who um, who was who inside them. And one, um, basically, I guess one lesson that I want to convey is that the only thing worse than capable CIA is an incompetent CIA. And what we've seen over time, just like we've had this hideous degeneration of the American leadership class from um, George H.W. Bush, Barack Obama, I would say, are two peaks of human capital, whatever your opinion of their politics. But Donald Trump and Joe Biden are not particularly impressive specimens. And it's very much the Yushchenko, not Yushchenko, the Andropov Chernomyrdin, not Chernomyrdin, the gerontocracy phase of the USSR that's playing out in the United States. But what happened was starting with Bush Jr., George W. Bush, because of the complete disregard of all of the intelligence analysis and planning ahead of the invasion of Iraq, you had a very demoralized um, CIA, very demoralized set of policy analysts inside the Department of Defense, and a significant wave of early retirements and resignations through that period. Decisions were being made by political hacks, people like Doug Feith, Paul Wolfowitz. So none of the career officers were interested in sticking around. Not anybody with any dynamism, not anybody who wanted to make a difference. Under Obama, that was reversed, and there was a new wave of entrants who had this sort of West Wing brain, liberal programming, which, I mean, not great, but also could be a lot worse, coming in. And they were just entering their mid-career when Donald Trump gets elected for the first time. And you have another wave of resignations, another set of people exiting as they hit issues with their own ability to progress in their career and their own ability to give candid analysis. You get fired for saying the wrong thing. You get fired for for advising the wrong course of action. Plus, under Trump 1, there was wave after wave of whistleblowers, of Russiagate scandals, you name it. So all of those people were pushed out or resigned in protest. One reason why you had the notorious I'm a millennial Latino with generalized anxiety disorder CIA recruiting ad and this drive towards DEI during the Biden period was an attempt to reconstruct these institutions, which had been bleeding personnel, had been bleeding talent through the Trump administration. And also an awareness on the part of what Hegseth and Trump would refer to as the woke generals. And honestly, I actually have a fair amount of respect for them because they saw what was coming.
Oh yeah.
They wanted to shift the demography and the ideological orientation of cadres inside the security apparatus away from reactionary white nationalists to a more representative, liberally oriented segment of the population, which, better. But then with Trump's reelection, all of those people have been fired. And there have been loyalty tests reinstituted as a condition of entry into public service. For instance, for postings at the State Department, one of the screening questions is who won the 2020 election. And unless your answer is Trump, that's the end of the interview.
Stolen election, man.
Precisely. So these are the people who are deciding where the bombs go. You're going to make mistakes, right? If this is the talent, then they could honestly have been imagining that this was some kind of madrasa and they were wiping out a rocket factory, or it could be anything at all, right? How many speakers of Farsi do you think are in Trump's CIA or in the Pete Hegseth's Department of War?
Yeah, you got
how many people? Yeah,
you got a better chance with LLMs. You can automate that shit, and it would actually be probably less incompetent, also more murderous, likely. And I don't know, there was this one totally fascist AI, alleged AI. I already forgot the name about, but yeah.
I remember one of the very first chatbots that was rolled out.
That one.
Yes, it was a Microsoft. It had a woman's name. It was a Microsoft chatbot, and it learned from its engagements with its audience. And as a result, right, the proto-groypers in crawling out of 4chan figured out how you feed it fascism so that within 48 hours, and I think I'm being generous, it was spewing overt racism, calling for the genocide of, I think, Jewish people, maybe more than just Jewish people. But yeah, the very first generation of semi AI chatbots was already on this path towards Hitlerdom.
Yeah.
And whenever Musk tries to de-wokeify Grok, right? And again, we're on a 24-hour clock to Mecha Hitler. The reality is that if you take the content that's online, if you take the textual basis of contemporary human knowledge and you feed it based on quality to teach an LLM, it's going to have a liberal bias because the better quality stuff tends to be produced by people who have a liberal or left orientation. You need to have some openness, a willingness to admit you're wrong, to course correct, to be skeptical of your priors in order to do good intellectual work. And these traits do exist among conservatives, but they are rarer. And LLM training is a volume game. So if you tell the LLM to favor conservative sources, yeah, you're going to get a ignorant, fire-breathing fascist pretty quickly, because there's no interrogation of priors. There's just a tendency to fall immediately into confirmation bias, and you see this repeated again and again whenever the experiment is run. I don't know how you get around it, but then again, creating an anti-woke AI is not really my problem. So I'll leave that to the geniuses at XAI. But I think that one reason why you have such a preoccupation with AI as a solution for figures like Trump and the reactionary tech oligarchs is precisely because they don't want to rely on cadres that think for themselves and that talk back. And a oracular black box AI that will just give them the right answer for any question that they need is very appealing to people that lack the social skills to negotiate, discuss, and admit they're wrong, or the intellectual openness to entertain new ways of thinking and oppositional ideas. So,
The
yeah,
automation of yes men.
precisely.
Yeah,
The yes geniuses.
yeah. There's something else, in that it reaffirms the other point you made earlier with liberalism coming along with this modus operandi that always has exclusion going on.
Mm.
You know, it seems to be deeply baked into the system, and of course, some fiddling around on the details won't change it really at its core. I mean, the courts are coming from inside the house. Should
Mm.
just continue, and now you have people like Mertz just being busy about defending Israel right now, and then the next day you have a less robotic, less automated version of a human like Macron, who comes around and offers assistance um,
Lebanon.
to the Lebanon right now and preparing for ground invasion and already getting in a in a bit of beef there, somehow declaring war on Germany. I think that's fucking hilarious. It's also so fitting because Merz was just coming out of Trump's ass, and
Mm.
after his visit, probably making some extra tariff deals and scolding the Spaniards, of course, for
Mm-hmm.
being so rude to actually hold up international law. I mean, what the? This is
It's
a
so
problem that's evolving. You know, it's widespread.
no, it's a fundamental challenge to deal with a figure like Trump. And I think that there's a profound problem of coordination among the middle powers of the West. Carney's gotten a fair bit of criticism from the left for not coming out more aggressively against the war in Iran, um, trying to sort of doing the thing where you start by saying, of course, we all hate the Ayatollahs. Of course, it's a terrible regime. It's great if they're gone, but maybe there's some procedural issues with international law that's not entirely compliant, that kind of thing, which disappointed many people. But the reality is that, especially right now, is not the time to treat the international discursive space as something as an agora where ideas can be exchanged freely, because the way that Trump works, um, whatever triggers his attention can create incredible pain for those that he dislikes. Right? If you say something too aggressive, then all of a sudden you're dealing with tariffs. All of a sudden you're going to be preoccupied for the next 3 weeks just handling the fallout of a strongly worded letter. So my hope was actually that all of these statements that seemed disappointing coming from European leaders, coming from Carney, were just a pragmatic acknowledgement that we have to keep our mouths shut. We have to nod and smile because the psychopath is right there. The Mad King might, he's, the monkey is holding a grenade, right? We need to, we need to keep the grenade away from us. Meanwhile, we build some institutions, we build some trade networks and maybe some security arrangements so that we're no longer at the monkey's mercy. It's a very delicate period of time if that's what you're doing. And based on what I've seen with things like the EU comprehensive CPTPP, whatever that stands for, that Carney's been championing, what he's been doing in Australia, there is an appetite for that. The SAFE program in Europe as well. All of these initiatives can, of course, be attacked from the left, but on a practical level, they are necessary to build some kind of tangible security material basis for European sovereignty, for the ability to push back on the United States, right? Spain alone can say all of the nice things and be very, very handsome and charming, but in a slightly different world without the EU there to dilute Trump's attention, it could end up like Venezuela, right? Until you're ready to actually protect yourself tangibly from overawing American power, it behooves you to keep your goddamn mouth shut. And the big question that we should have for governments in the West is, are they doing what is necessary to stand up a capacity to be able to resist getting Maduro'd? If you're a leftist prime minister of Spain, or have the United States completely level your economy through bankrupting tariffs. If they're doing that, then we need to let them cook. If they're not doing that, we need to replace them with somebody who will.
You would wish that was the case, but this visit from Merz, one of, if not the biggest economic powerhouse of Europe, just went to the US to lick the ice cone, essentially. His own career, his BlackRock bullshit, he is politically just going along with Trump's bullshit. He's doing the same shit at home with his, what was his city skyline discussion, where he made the point that there were too many people who are not white, essentially, being bad for the public images of the cities, and he's totally fishing on the right. And you, I feel it's already falling apart because the nation states develop their own national interest, and nationalism is on the rise. So you will have more idiots like him who try to do the military Keynesianism and try to, like, this way, save the economy. Germany is developing into a military state. So that's not really then a problem, I guess. That seems to be the calculation. But it's so short-sighted, just on their own career, on their own benefit, whatever. It's amazing.
I feel like it would be unneighborly to be overly critical of Germany, but there's in some ways they compete with the UK in level of disappointment. I kind of wish that we could just have an exchange program where maybe Maltz he can run Luxembourg for a little while, and maybe we get Zelensky in Berlin. The I think that there is potential behind some kind of military Keynesianism to get Europe out of its doldrums, but it my deep and abiding concern is that it will be oriented in exactly the wrong direction. You don't need to build tanks. You don't need to build heavy machinery. You don't need to build these massive weapons of war to
But
keep up with the Americans.
but
Instead,
Russia.
Mhm. Well, no. I'm despite the fact that for a poll, I may be the most Russophilic specimen you can find. I do agree that Russia's a problem with my countrymen. The Putin, it's not a good country. They are aggressive, and what they're doing in Ukraine is scandalous. It's best for everyone if they're defeated, but you don't defeat them with tanks or heavy weapons or complicated F-35 style aircraft. The Ukrainians have shown that you defeat them with $200 drones, right? We know that the key to future warfare is going to be some combination of small, effective drones, whether ground or air, quadrotors, together with cyber capabilities and sovereignty over digital space. Right? We need to get away from the American tech oligarchs. We need to break the monopolies of Google and Facebook, Meta. Amazon, and replace them with ideally more open architectures that are based in Europe. And this could be the basis of a jobs program. This could be the basis of an economic revival, which doesn't force you into this useless cul-de-sac of creating weapons of war that have no civilian use. Because all of the equipment that I've described, all of the capabilities that I've described are also tools that can be used productively for civilian ends. You can grow the economy and you can get away from this ridiculous rent, this tribute that Europe sends every year to the American tech oligarchs. That is something that needs to be broken. And that would create jobs from, Mecklenburg all the way to Saxon. That should be the basis of German reindustrialization. That and green technology, right? Right now, we're seeing what the limitations of fossil fuels are doing with the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. One reason, apparently, I just spoke with a Polish journalist who returned from Cuba, and he told me that there's a huge problem with fossil fuels there. For instance, his flight and every flight from Cuba flies out of Havana and then immediately lands at the closest airport, whether it's in the Dominican Republic, whether it's in Mexico. All they can do is this hop over water to get somewhere where there's actual fuel supplies that they can then take on and go to Europe, Asia, Latin America, wherever. But in Cuba itself, there's only enough fuel for that jump. But there are no blackouts. Why are there no blackouts? Because the Chinese have been putting up solar farms all across the interior. So electricity is not, there's limits, but it's not a crisis situation. It's not a shortage economy when it comes to electricity. But fossil fuels, yes, that's where the United States is exerting pressure. That's where the blockade is being felt. Similarly, you don't have Cuban weather everywhere, but you have Spain, you've got Italy, right? Give the Albanians a few euros and put up panels all over their Mediterranean coast. and you could produce enough renewables to wean Europe off fossil fuels. And there's another economic program that you could use to re-energize Eastern Germany without blaming it all on the people who tan. And it's appalling, the lack of imagination, the lack of coordination that's happening at the European level, because all of these problems do have solutions. And Europe is not a poor continent. There's a tremendous amount of both financial capital and human capability there, human ingenuity, people who work hard. You could very easily put the country on, put the whole continent on a path towards an integrated 21st century information and energy economy, but mouths hurts, right?
I was about to say they essentially rolled back the policies regarding green energy. I mean, just to boil it down. But yeah, that's what's going on, and we are going to militarize, and then probably the military isn't even about Russia. It's just economy. And then at some point, Germany will use the military against Germans when the North Sea is running across the shores and sea level rises. And then, yeah, a lot of people will have to get moved, just like in, I don't know, Gaza or the Lebanon. Or, yeah, and that's probably what's going on in their minds. I can only speculate. I don't really want to know, because you're right. There's so much potential, and and not just when it comes to, I don't know, drone technology, waging cheaper, more effective wars. How, however, I mean, there's something to that, and there's also, I think that was the Sun Tzu again, with the art of war, something like winning a battle without drawing the sword.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of
Yeah.
diplomatic potential, a lot of trades that could have been done, a lot of investments, a lot of cooperation. When I think about Russia, of course, it's a problem, but it's also a problem Europe created. When I think about Putin giving his speech in Germany, in the German Bundestag, talking about cooperation and whatnot, and then what happened? Yeah, NATO expanded to the east, and we already declared Russia as a problem in, when was it, 2014, when the stuff in the Ukraine started. And at this point, I don't think the people on the Crimea want to leave Russia, not into that Ukraine, not to get just immediately recruited into the army by people roaming the streets, just throwing you into a van. This is just,
No, I agree. For me, thinking about the role of NATO expansion eastward, the missed opportunities of pulling Russia into European security architecture, finding a partnership that would work for both Russia and Europe, um, maybe doing it despite American hesitation or American opposition. When I think about all of the potential, that the potential off ramps that could have been taken, yeah, it's heartbreaking. I certainly am sympathetic to all of that criticism, but it's like the Vietnamese say when the Americans insist that they won every battle despite losing the war. It's like that statement is true, but it is also irrelevant. We are where we are now, and at this point, Russia is an enemy. It has its own internal logic that's driving it towards militarization, its own geopolitical hostility. It is seeking to undermine Europe from within. before Elon Musk joined the party, the greatest sponsor of the Alternative für Deutschland was, of course, Vladimir Putin. And Russia is the patron of Viktor Orban and different internal European saboteurs. So we are where we are, unfortunately. And I would like nothing more than to have a constructive partnership with Russia and a way to coexist and peacefully prosper and develop across the entire Eurasian plain, all the way to China. It would be great if from Portugal to South Korea, it was just one BRICS Belt and Road network.
Yeah,
That
let's get
was
the Federation going, man. I'm a Star Trek
yeah,
guy as well. It's
exactly.
it's so true. And
But the problem, the obstacles aren't always our fault, right? There's plenty of blame to go around. And I think that until Putin dies, the opportunity for rapprochement is has ended, right? Either Putin dies or Europe dies, and then the successors might be able to make peace.
I,
But
that's some rough words for me, some tough stuff for me to swallow. A bitter pill. We, you know, I'm seeing also a potential for something worse than Putin happening to Europe and Russia. You know, there's a big one there, and in a way, you already mentioned Elon Musk, uh, the other Putin with his Twiddler. I mean, there's really it's the stomach problem going on. Everyone is doing it. It's all just going to get worse, more automated. More of the wrong people are going to profit from all this shit. Uh, let's be clear about this too. So I see the problem really more like yeah, like a call coming from inside the house again, and it might also at the same time speak through Putin to us. You know, it's a weird thing.
well, I think that there's a it can always get worse, without a doubt. Which is one reason why I like the European Union, because I know what the alternatives would look like. Brexit was, for me, the peak of insanity, and um, there's un, unless there's some way to work around that hard border in Northern Ireland, then it's only a matter of time before the demographic shift in Ulster is going to reignite the troubles. Right, that becomes a question of what you do with a region which is majority Irish, majority Catholic, but cannot live in community with the rest of the island. But we do have some agency in this, as imperfect as our institutions are. And there are a few places where elite interests and sort of the general European interest um, partially align. And that's where I'm trying to insert my energy. And that's where I'm trying to tweak things to go a little in a better direction. And I think that one place relevant for our conversation that needs to be worked on and where there's a tremendous amount of potential is solidifying a constructive, genuine Polish-German friendship. Not this grudging, I guess we're at peace now and we're both sharing Europe, but a way in which we're able to work closely enough so that the most dynamic regions of Poland, which are the West, can spill over, can help ameliorate the most fascist and immiserated regions of Germany. It's remarkable how without a border, you can still feel the border. And I think that it largely has to do with psychological and a cultural hesitancy and an inability for the current generation of German and Polish leaders to do what um, the French and Germans did after World War II, right? Actually bury the hatchet and get to work building a common Europe. I I I have no illusions about the issues in Poland. Like I said at the very beginning, the bad news is it's 50% fascist. But we can work with the 50% that isn't and maybe eat down so that next year it's only 49.9% and get that lower and lower. And partly because of the inability of previous generations to find ways to make this coexistence more constructive, I feel like there's a lot of low hanging fruit when it comes to integrating more fully Polish and German economies, Polish and German institutions. And that border zone from Stettin, down to Silesia should be an engine for that for that improvement, for that general development, rather than what it is right now, this kind of sullen hinterland on the German side and kind of a European fun party zone on the Polish side.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of very positive user reviews from Germans who went there to go shopping, not just math, because all the math labs in Europe or in Poland or somewhere in East Europe. And
We're good at chemistry, man. It's
yeah,
the Eastern European technical genius.
right. Slavic engineering, man. Funny. I mean, that's so true. And that's the same what's going on the west side with the Dutch coming over to Germany to go shopping. you know, it's
This
kind of funny.
a friend of mine lives in Kreuzlingen, and the Swiss. Yeah, it turns out that for the Swiss, Germany is Mexico.
Think about that, man.
Yeah, I'm just twisting the knife.
Just let that sit there. Just let it hang. I was in the Swiss once. It was amazing. On some hemp parade where weed was already legal in the Swiss, while in Germany we were lagging behind and it's still only partly legalized.
Oh yes, I looked into this. I was living in Maastricht for a while last year, and I was looking at the different regulations around marijuana across Europe, because in Canada, Trudeau, right, praise be his name, just legalized it, right? It's in fact, you get more social opprobrium and judgment for smoking tobacco cigarettes than you do for walking around with a joint. It's like that better be marijuana, young man.
Make that tobacco work.
Exactly. The no one ever died of secondhand meth, but the and I looked into Germany, and Germany managed to decriminalize in exactly the worst possible way. Right? Incredibly complicated, opaque, these bizarre restrictions, all of these hoops that you have to jump through, which guarantee that it's going to become like an insider type arrangement that just makes that allows a black market to persist in perpetuity. Worst possible way. The It's yeah, so maybe was it reunification? Did something go wrong then? What happened? What happened, man?
What happened to Germany, man? Yeah, I can remember I was young and full of good hopes. And I was also a bit of a shitlip back then, but I kind of,
Mhm.
the shit somehow felt like it worked and you
Mm,
didn't have racial profiling going on in the police, which came with privatization. So after the
mm,
reunification, so you're not wrong there. And with that, the pendulum seems to swing back also in the other direction. Then you had this massive, yeah, essentially flood of people coming from East Germany to West Germany just to get money and get a good job and finally live the free life they dreamt about, and probably never went back. And then you got the immigration policies, um, just
oh yeah. Yeah,
doubling
the
down on the already persisting structure of racism and bourgeois
well,
bullshit.
the immigration process in Germany is like marijuana legalization. It's
Exactly.
engineered in the worst possible way
They
from a
can't
purely technocratic
they
perspective.
can't even make money the first year they're here. They have to live
Yeah.
from government handouts, which are lower than what people in Germany get for basic living standards. So you already got like second and third class people running around. So how are they not supposed to get criminal? Like it's
Well,
an
and
open
you concentrate them together, right, away from Germans,
yeah,
and you create an incentive for, they're especially young men. They're
yeah,
going to be bored.
yeah.
They're cut off from contact with women. They can't date. They can't have a social life. They're away from their families, so parents aren't there to impose some kind of discipline and order. Um, Without anything to do but having this target rich environment, somebody is going to go criminal. And all it takes is one, because he's going to be very good at it, right? It's going to be easy. So he's going to show up and he'll have a lot of money and everyone will be like, oh, yalla, look at you. And then you've got a mafia, right? Because he recruits everyone else. And now you've got a gang, and that's how you get gangs. It doesn't matter where they're from. You This would happen with Irish. This would happen with Finns. This would happen with Icelanders. You
Everybody.
create this
Yeah,
institution, and it is an incubator for
yeah.
this kind of for this type of social pathology.
As if it
And
was
now,
political will, you know?
yeah, no, it's just I Germans. Uh, if you'll forgive my
No.
you know Eurocultural essentializing. Germans are great at systems thinking and operating within structures. But when something needs to be improvised or adapted, something new needs to, for that, you need a pull, right?
Some Slavic engineering. There we go again.
Exactly. Some improvisation, some figuring things out under pressure. In Polish, we have
Under
expression.
Prussia.
If you can't go through, you go around. Um, but in Germany,
That's true. That's true.
and this is this is one reason why we need each other, right? Right? Like the prospects for European collaboration across these types of social limitations, these habits, which we don't even know we have. Um, it takes an outsider who's nonetheless familiar and that you can trust to point these things out. Otherwise, you're not even conscious of them. They're limitations you don't know you have. So if you don't even, I can't remember, some dead ancient Greek said, you cannot teach a man what he thinks he already knows, right? Like if you're unaware that you have a gap in your knowledge and your awareness, then how can you possibly fix it? Um, and this is another reason why the EU would have so much potential if it can, if it didn't end up creating this caste, right? Like, um, because the European policymaking elite, you get your representative mix, a sufficient, an appropriate number of Romanians, right? Like your token Portuguese, the smattering of Balts, but then they create their own isolated bubble where they end up representing no one at all. Um,
Elite capture.
and
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. Because after all, once you're inside that citadel, once you're on Elysium or in the promised land, and you have to go back with the Morlocks at home, deal with them, you're like, oh my God, when's the next flight to Brussels? How did I ever live with these people?
Okay, there's that. But there's also capitalism and incentive structures. And you don't really get a paper sponsored when you say, hey, Russia isn't the only one involved in this war in the Ukraine, and we need to come to our senses and stop with the build up and with the blaming and the Russophobia. No, you will get
Well,
problems with that.
the the my view is that short term, medium term, until Putin dies, there's not going to be a solution. And when Putin dies, he has set everything up institutionally within Russia to guarantee that there will be a succession crisis in a time of troubles. The economy is lopsided. He's created a personal court instead of strengthening state institutions. The relationship between regions and the center is just fucked, right? Like you've got Islam Karimov basically being his vassal emir over Chechnya, if I'm remembering the name correctly, and he's got a similar relationship with the other republics as well. You had Yevgeny Primakov, not Primakov, Prigozhin, the Wagner guy, launching a mercenary revolt, and he made it halfway to Moscow before he was stopped. It's a dysfunctional country. It is
Yeah,
not working well. This
it's
is not a
amazing.
normal society.
Yeah.
And what I expect will happen is when he dies, it'll break again, just like the Soviet Union did. At which point, I think the appropriate attitude is to have no particular affinity with the Russian state, but all charity and compassion and cooperation with the Russian people.
Yeah.
And this may take the form of having a series of successor states. Some of them will be ethnic republics like Tatarstan, like Chechnya. Some of them will be deeply Russophone and traditionally Russian culturally. Um, for instance, the Kaliningrad Oblast, there's no reason why that should belong to be politically subordinated to Moscow. It should be its own Baltic city state. Similarly, St. Petersburg could anchor northwestern Russia. Moscow could have its own region, and then, like in a similar way, with a similar generosity and spirit of inclusion that was extended to the countries of the former Eastern Bloc after 1989. These should be treated as future EU members
Mhm.
and gradually reach Europe closer and closer to the Urals as China is likely converting the Far East into province after province, and then we shake hands at Lake Baikal.
And then dissolve it all in the federation. I mean, that's what I see
Why
happening
not?
as well. That would be a nice utopia.
Well, I figure that we're going to get there one way or another. It's just how tall will the mountains of dead be? Um, the If I think about any optimistic future for mankind generally, um, the protagonist is really Beijing. Um, we're already seeing its leadership in terms of advanced technology. The Belt and Road Initiative has transformed economic relations across the global South um, in a way that was unimaginable previously. Um, and the biggest obstacle, actually, to some kind of Eurasian unified economic and cultural space is the um, Euro-Russian conflict, which is, of course, largely driven by American geopolitical preoccupations from 30 years ago. You know, we're sort of all captives to uh, the dead men from well, I guess Bill Clinton is still alive, but, you know, it's decisions made in those days that are haunting us.
Haunted by neoliberal ghosts. Yeah.
Exactly. Ghouls in some cases, because they refuse to die. But Putin ultimately is one of them, right? Maybe a deformed outcast from that segment, but he belongs to that age.
Mhm.
And we'll see what comes after him. We'll see what comes after Xi Jinping. The reality is that the potential that China has for advancing human history is enormous. The potential there is really impressive. While the United States is doing everything in its power to destroy the world as it destroys itself.
Yeah, it's merely
I
reactionary at this point. Even with
Oh yeah.
Greenland, the talk was
Oh God.
about China and Russia, and I was like, wait a second, what? Yeah, of course, because China would come there and would build up harbors, would make deals, whatever, had development, and
Exactly.
it's just about blocking that development, building their
Yeah,
own
because
harbors.
precisely because the Chinese would enslave you, we will have to enslave you first, right? It's precisely the same logic as the attack on Iran, right? If we waited, then Iran would have defended itself against Israel, and then we'd be fighting them anyway. So we might as well just attack, as though there were no agency there, as though there were no distinction between those two courses of action. Um, and I don't know how long this madness is going to impact the United States, um, because it really does. It's boiled over. There's something, in a way, it's a relief that Donald Trump is in the late stages of senility, and that he is the kind of limited figure that he is, because in the hands of a capable reactionary leader, if somebody were sequencing the consolidation of authoritarianism in the United States first, and then you go after Iran, if you had actually planned for a longer conflict rather than running out of interceptors after 2 weeks, you would you might be looking at, 1,000-year Amerireich. But I don't know. I don't see how this can last very long. Um, I think that it can get a lot worse before it gets better, but it'll either have to course correct, and I don't know if there's anyone within MAGA that could stabilize it in a effectively fascist direction, or they'll have to there'll be an opening for the Democrats to get back into power. Of course, the Democrats have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity, but maybe that'll take the heat off of the rest of us for a little while. We can um, figure out our own more local solutions.
Yeah, it's a dark outlook, man. Very dark, especially in the US. You have this two-party system that effectively closed off a third-party competition. It's weird financial structures, all
Oh
this
God, yes.
money involved with all that. It's just straight up oligarchy. And
And yet Mamdani is running New York
yeah,
pretty well, and he's one of the most popular leaders in all of the United States, and a Muslim immigrant who quotes the Prophet Muhammad during speeches. And it's amazing how uh,
breaking
he
lefty brains, man. This is the
exactly
Mamdani thing is wild. I mean, there's
hope pilled.
the bus ticket already ruined people's heads. I mean, is he now uh, making bus tickets more expensive or not? I don't even know, but many people lost their heads about that. I was just too bored to just look into it. And the entire discussion seems to be cooked up also. I mean, of course, yeah, I see your point, and that's exactly the way to go to hijack the Democratic Party with smart people like him. I mean, obviously works in Chicago as well, pretty good. So we need more of that. But
The old guard, I mean, Chuck Schumer will need to be taken out in a coffin, right? He is going to hold on to power until the very last possible moment. And you have that entire generation of Democratic gerontocrats that are worse than useless, just occupying space that could belong to
just
somebody.
stealing time,
Just stealing time, precisely.
time we don't
And
have.
I'm precisely. And but the things that can't go on forever don't. And I don't know what the crisis and the dissolution will look like, but there will be a crisis, there will be a dissolution, and out of that, um, some change will be forced. Uh, I hope that, right, one thing that I've been worried about for basically ever since he was elected was that Mamdani would end up being assassinated or arrested, somehow repressed. Because if you're a capable reactionary, if you're an effective fascist, if you're Steve Miller with some competence, then you cannot permit Mamdani to succeed. Absolutely anathema. You're going to Sergei Kirov his ass. Ideally, find a way to blame it on another Muslim and use that as the basis of repression, right?
Ah,
Just like
mean
Stalin did.
Antifa, Antifa
Yeah,
Muslims.
exactly, exactly. Antifa killed him because the he refused to put they them on the bus tickets.
He
Um,
wasn't radical enough. He was a
exactly.
sellout.
But I wonder, maybe they're just not capable of that. Maybe they'll let him go, and maybe when things fall apart, because right now the establishment of both parties has just been so radically discredited, um,
Yep.
deeply unpopular, both on the right and the left. So somebody else is going to have a bite at the apple. Somebody else is going to have a chance to establish a new direction for the United States. And I don't know if it'll be better, but there are some weird things happening. For instance, the revulsion at Netanyahu personally and at the influence of Israel on US foreign and domestic policy more generally has led to this weird bromance between Cenk Uyghur of the Young Turks and Tucker Carlson. Right? There's an interview that both of them filmed and both of them released through their respective outlets, which feels a little like Molotov Ribbentrop. It has that kind of, this is a summit. I don't like you, you don't like me, but I also like you, and we can agree on on what needs to be done. And these new alliances and new constellations of power, we don't know how they're going to play out. If And maybe that creates an opening for somebody that is less of a monster. But all of that remains to be seen.
That's so funny, man. Those motherfuckers. Hey, they're not just uniting the left anymore, you know? They are uniting us all. We are all being synchronized now with this fucked up bullshit on an epic level. Yeah, that's quite something to behold. Also, a very positive note. So you surprised me there. That was good.
Well, I think maybe that's a good point to leave it for today,
Right?
because I'll only get darker, right? That's as good as it gets for me.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Kuba. This was excellent.
My pleasure.
We'll just end it here. Bye, people.